잠궈.
아니 안 잠겨요.
20 아니야 20?
안 잠겨요. 아,
잘라 먹었어요?
제 딸 주려고 5cm 줄였어요.
아니 저 팔찌 줄을 밑장빼기 한 거예요? 따님.
우정 때문에 했다고 생각하시면 되잖아요. 이렇게. 딱 이렇게 딱 이렇게
참나.
딱 되잖아.
딸 바보 딸 바보.
자,
알았어.
이렇게.
뭐 딸을 위한 거니까.
와 예쁘다.
아니 나는 이렇게까지 이쁠 줄 몰랐는데 진짜 마음에 드는데. 아.
멋있어요.
고맙습니다.
예,
고맙습니다. 네,
감사합니다.
감사합니다.
건강하시고요.
고맙십시오.
아 너무 예쁘다. 너무 예뻐.
나 진짜 생애 첫 팔찌야.
아 진짜요?
첫 팔찌.
어.
내가 오늘 장신구를 잘 안 하거든.
아 그렇구나. 아니 너무 예뻐요. 잘 어울려요.
아니 어때요? 우리가 뭐 경주에 굉장히 유명한 뭐 문화재, 유적지 이런 걸 보는 것도 당연히 좋지만 이렇게 예?
재밌어요.
공개 민속촌에 와가지고 다양한 그쪽 공방들도 가보고 다양한 작품들도 보고 체험까지 하니까
네. 그러니까
있잖아.
구경만 하면 아 예쁘다 멋있다 했는데 보니까 약간 즐겁고 재밌어요.
그러니까요. 여러분 생각하시고 상상하시는 것보다 훨씬 즐거움이 큽니다.
즐거워.
경주 민속공예촌.
There is no greater blessing than to have good health as you grow old. Even though my mom is over 70, she is peppy and full of energy. One day, our family started practicing Taekwondo, and it turned out to be a special blessing for us. Taekwondo family, return to happiness.
옛날에는 택시부터 시작해가지고 버스, 덤프트럭, 낮과 밤이 없이 몸이 부서지도록 일을 했죠. 그러다 보니까 몸이 많이 망가졌어요. 허리 협착증도 생겼고 무릎도 아프고 이제는 내 삶이 다 됐는갑다 생각을 하고 사는 것도 싫고 완전 좌절을 했죠.
지팡이를 짚고 다니실 만큼 근력이 약해지셔가지고 너무 힘들었는데 우연찮게 실버 태권도라는 거를 알게 되셨어요.
다리도 안 올라갔거든요, 솔직히. 근데 64세부터 태권도를 해서 7년째 하고 있습니다.
인상도 너무 밝아지셨고 빨리 가고 싶다고 하시고 도복을 보면서 흐뭇해 하시더라고요. 그때부터 어머니의 삶이 다시 시작이 된 것 같고 지팡이를 안 짚기 시작하셨어요. 그게 진짜 놀라운 변화인 것 같습니다.
어르신들이 운동을 통해서 노년을 건강한 생활을 할 수 있게끔 도와주는 게 바로 저는 태권도라고 생각이 듭니다.
Not only did Mother experience this change, but her fellow teammates also felt reborn due to the dramatic change in their lives.
너무 좋아요. 온 세상을 다 얻은 것 같죠. 제가 태권도 전도사가 된 것 같아요.
열정이 높으신 분이죠. 그 가족 전체가 태권도 가족입니다. 아주 화목하고 건강이 넘치는 대한민국의 대표적인 태권도 가족이 아닌가 싶습니다.
We're a family that loves practicing Taekwondo, so we've embarked on a new challenge.
사실 저희 가족들이 아픔이 정말 많습니다. 제가 아침에 일어났는데 반신이 마비가 왔었고 저희 아이는 태어나자마자 인공 심박기를 달았었고 정상으로도 살기 힘들다는 진단을 받았었지만 이 아이를 보면서 기적이라는 것을 알게 됐거든요. 그래서 태권도는 행복 그 자체입니다.
태권도를 해서 강해지니까 더 자신감이 올라가고 행복해요.
I believe Taekwondo is a blessing from heaven. It has made us hopeful for the future. Every day, we're excited to see what's in store for us tomorrow. Practice it with your family. Taekwondo brings happiness.
By Generation MZ, for Generation MZ, News Generation. We explore the most talked about issues among MZers. Beyond the panel, we exchange diverse viewpoints with people behind the screen. Where the voices of the MZ generation connect through shared understanding. News Generation. Special untold narratives of diplomacy. Diplomats' archives, hidden stories. Through historical materials, we discover new dimensions in international cooperation and highlight moments of mutual exchange with embassies from around the world. We reflect on the value of history that transcends borders. Capturing various cultural scenes across Korea. One day, one K-culture. K-trend, K-people, K-story, and even K-stage. We experience everyday moments together, talk about life stories, and meet fascinating works and creative performances up close. Tune in for daily episodes packed with the charm of K-culture. A stage where sound comes alive. I'm live. In a space without barriers, experience the moment when artists and audience become one through music. Each performance, conveying the musician's originality, reaches the audience vividly through headphones. Immerse in the energy and flow of music on I'm Live.
엄청 크다. 손 크네. 태권도 원! 하! 하! 아직까지는 쉽네. 잠깐만. 너 안 쉬워. 힘드는데?
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 APEC은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 APEC 2025로 이어집니다.
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. The South Korean government says U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to visit Gyeongju during APEC. And although he may miss the summit itself, talks between Seoul and Washington will still take place. And Trump's potential meeting with China Xi is also still on track, with the U.S. Treasury Secretary saying relations between Washington and Beijing have substantially de-escalated. Trump also attended a major summit of world leaders in Egypt and signed a peace deal to end the war in Gaza, along with several other world leaders. All living Israeli hostages have now been freed, and there were emotional scenes as they were reunited with their families after 2 years. Rival parties in South Korea clashed over Chief Justice Choi Dae, who faces allegations of election interference, as the first National Assembly audit under the Lee Jae-myung administration kicked off. We begin this morning with U.S. President Donald Trump's upcoming visit to South Korea for the APEC leaders meeting, which is set to mark another key moment in Seoul-Washington diplomacy. At the same time, the United States Treasury Chief says Trump's planned meeting with China's Xi Jinping during the summit week signals easing tensions between Washington and Beijing. Our Pyongyang starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to visit South Korea later this month for the APEC Leaders Week in Gyeongju City. Speaking at a parliamentary hearing on Monday, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun said that while Trump may miss the APEC Leaders Summit, talks between Seoul and Washington will still take place. Cho added that the visit would complete the cycle of mutual visits between the Korean and U.S. leaders within just 5 months of President Lee Jae-myung's administration taking office. He called it an opportunity to review the progress made so far and discuss ways to further elevate bilateral cooperation going forward. While Seoul and Washington coordinate their next moves, the U.S. is also continuing dialogue with Beijing. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed that a meeting between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea is still on track. Bessent also said there were substantial communications between the two sides over the weekend. He stated that U.S.-Chinese relations have substantially de-escalated, noting that both sides plan to continue working-level meetings this week on the sidelines of the IMF and World Bank gatherings.
It was a miscalculation, but we are communicating now. I am confident that we can move forward.
With Trump's visit expected to include separate meetings with both Korean and Chinese leaders, next month's APEC week could help diffuse trade tensions and set the tone for renewed cooperation. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
And also at the National Assembly audit, South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Hyun said Monday that Washington has presented a new alternative regarding the $350 billion investment fund, a key issue in follow-up South Korea-U.S. tariff negotiations. Speaking during a parliamentary audit on Monday, Cho said the government is reviewing an alternative proposal by Washington on how Seoul would finance the investment package. The presidential office also explained that Seoul had proposed a revised financial plan in September and received a response from Washington, but said details cannot be disclosed while negotiations are ongoing. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chul will travel to Washington on Wednesday to meet U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, with all eyes on whether the talks will provide a breakthrough on the deal. And we're just around 2 weeks away from this year's APEC leaders meeting set to be held in Gyeongju City. For more on what to expect, we're joined today by Professor Min Jung-un, Professor of Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Min, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So the Korean government has officially confirmed that Trump will be attending the APEC leaders meeting in Gyeongju and that a summit between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Trump will take place. How significant is this and what issues are likely to be on the agenda?
Well, for the upcoming APEC summit, it's important for South Korea to successfully hold several bilateral summit meetings, including ROK-US summit, as you mentioned. And regarding the bilateral summit between South Korea and U.S. at the APEC, will be a good opportunity that the two leaders of the countries would improve trust and bond between them. And it will be the second time the two leaders meet in person, and it's likely that personal trust between them will be improved significantly. Meanwhile, concerning the agendas of the summit, the two leaders are likely to talk about various issues on the bilateral relations between the two countries, such as alliance modernization, including increasing South Korea's military spending, tariffs negotiations, and North Korea issues. And among them, I think North Korean issues are drawing much attention nowadays. As you know, President Trump is sending its love call to Chairman Kim Jong-un, and Pyongyang's response is also positive. So there is a possibility that President Trump will meet Chairman Kim at the Panmunjom when he visits South Korea for the APEC later this month. And then it will be the second time that the three leaders from U.S., North Korea, and South Korea gathered together. As you may remember, they first met together at Panmunjom in 2019. And I think, personally, South Korea want to have Nam북mi negotiation 2.0, which means that the three countries, U.S., North Korea, and South Korea, participate and make progress for their denuclearization and peace on the Korean Peninsula. So I hope that the upcoming APEC summit will provide a good momentum for revitalizing summit diplomacy between U.S. and North Korea through active support and assistance of South Korea.
Right, and trade issues are another issue that's critical between South Korea and the United States. The two countries have yet to reach an agreement on tariffs. Do you think they will be able to strike a deal during the APEC meeting?
Yes, I think there is still possibility that the two leaders will announce the final outcome of the ongoing tariff negotiations between the two countries when they have a bilateral summit on the sidelines of the APEC later this month. As you know, the Trump government is pursuing its America First trade policy aggressively in order to reduce its trade deficits and restore its manufacturing capabilities. And imposing high reciprocal tariffs and sectoral tariffs for cars, steel, and other major industries reflect such policy orientations. But the problem is that U.S. is asking too much and pushing too hard, even for its close allies. So it's very difficult for South Korea to accept what U.S. wants. But anyway, the South Korea-U.S. made the trade deal in late July that South Korea would invest $350 billion to the United States and purchase more American energy. And in return for that, the U.S. will reduce the tariff, reciprocal tariffs and the sectoral tariffs for cars down to 15%. And the two countries continue to make negotiations to get the details of the deal, but it has not been easy to narrow down the differences they have because due to how to use $350 billion investment to the United States. And as the South Korean government pointed out, $350 billion accounted for about 80% of the US dollars that South Korean government keeps. And therefore, if it is directly invested to the United States in cash, South Korea will be likely to face another financial crisis like what the country had to encounter back in 1997. So that's why Lee Jae-myung government cannot accept what U.S. wants for the details of the $350 billion investment and why South Korea is asking a currency swap to its U.S. counterpart. But considering that both countries want to make a progress for the deal and that they're working hard to narrow the gaps, so I expect that there is still possibility that the final outcome can come out sooner or later, possibly at the APEC later this month.
Right, I see. And the world will be watching to see whether President Donald Trump and Xi Jinping will meet at the APEC meeting. It seems trade tensions between the two largest economies are softening. But how likely is it that the meeting will actually happen, and how might it play out?
Well, I think a U.S. China summit is very likely to be held in Gyeongju during the week of the APEC summit later this month. Of course, there were speculations that the summit would be postponed due to President Trump's threat to raise the tariffs on China to 100% in response to China's export controls on core minerals. But as you mentioned, President Trump took a step back, and the two countries retained from being more aggressive on the agendas. So it shows that the two countries are going through a fierce battle of wits in order to secure a favorable outcome ahead of the summit, but they don't want to ruin or derail the summit itself. So I expect that they will reach a trade deal at the summit, although they will go through the tough and fierce negotiating process before reaching the agreement.
Right, I guess we'll have to see how the summit goes. All right, Professor Min, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your time and insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday touted the Gaza ceasefire deal, saying that it has opened the door to rebuilding. The comments came during a summit of world leaders in Egypt as the last of the Israeli hostages were returned to their families. Our Lee-seung-jae tells us more.
U.S. President Donald Trump attended a major summit of world leaders in Egypt on Monday, where he said that the Gaza ceasefire deal has opened the door to rebuilding.
And now the rebuilding begins. The rebuilding is maybe going to be the easiest part. I think we've done a lot of the hardest part because the rest comes together. We all know how to rebuild, and we know how to build better than anybody in the world.
The comments come as Trump arrived for the high-level gathering, which brought together more than 20 heads of state. He co-chaired the meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, signaling strong international support for the agreement. The ceasefire, which was agreed last week, halted Israel's massive offensive on Gaza City, which had killed scores of people daily. Under the terms of the deal, Hamas released the final 20 living Israeli hostages, while Israel freed more than 1,900 Palestinian prisoners. The agreement also includes provisions for a major increase in food and humanitarian aid entering famine-stricken Gaza. The hostage release on Monday marked a dramatic and emotional moment. The freed hostages returned to Israel after more than 2 years in captivity, where they were reunited with their families. The bodies of 28 deceased hostages are also being returned as part of the deal. According to the Times of Israel, 4 bodies were returned through the Red Cross on Monday, but no information had been given regarding the other 24. The summit and the ceasefire deal represent the most significant step toward peace since the start of the war 2 years ago, which devastated the Gaza Strip and killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. Speaking in Israel earlier in the day, Trump celebrated the U.S. brokered agreement, declaring it had effectively ended the war and opened the door to a durable peace in the Middle East. Lee-seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics has posted its biggest profit since 2022. According to a preliminary earnings report on Tuesday, the company reported an estimated operating profit of 12.1 trillion Korean won, or almost $8.5 billion in the third quarter. That's nearly 32% higher than the year before. Sales also rose 8.7% on year to 86 trillion won, or more than $60 billion, driven by a rebound in the semiconductor market and solid demand for memory chips. Meanwhile, at the National Assembly, the first audit under the Lee Jae-myung administration kicked off this week, with the biggest interest rooted in the Supreme Court's inspection of the Judiciary Committee by Chief Justice Cho Lee-dae. Our political correspondent Moon Il-yeon reports.
The new administration's first National Assembly audit opened Monday, setting the stage for government-wide accountability checks through to November. But the spotlight today was squarely on the judiciary and the political storm surrounding Chief Justice Choi Lee that stems from a controversial Supreme Court ruling, which found President Lee guilty of making false claims during his 2022 presidential campaign. Appearing before the Legislation and Judiciary Committee, Cho said summoning judges to testify over their rulings threatens the constitutional independence of the courts.
If judges are made to testify about their rulings simply because they presided over a certain case, it could discourage them from making judgments based on the Constitution, the law, and their conscience, and even lead to decisions swayed by outside pressures.
He added that his attendance followed long-standing custom to deliver opening and closing remarks. But lawmakers were unsatisfied. Ruling Democratic Party leader Chung Chung-le urged the Chief Justice to approach the audit with utmost sincerity and said the audit must uncover alleged interference in President Lee's election law case. Across the aisle, main opposition People Power Party leader Chang Dong-hyuk accused the DP of using the audit for political attacks, vowing instead to expose what he called abuses of political, administrative and judicial power. Meanwhile, economic ministries were also under scrutiny. Trade Minister Kim Jong-kwon warns that Korea's heavy export dependence on specific countries makes it vulnerable to shocks and pledged to diversify export markets and strengthen cooperation with the U.S., China and Japan. Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chol, for his part, said Seoul must swiftly conclude tariff talks with Washington, confirming he is arranging a meeting with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent this week. As the audit season begins, both ruling and opposition blocs appear determined to use it to press their narratives, one emphasizing reform, the other restraint, with the judiciary caught in the middle of Korea's deepening political divide. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Lee Jae-myung presided over a meeting on Monday with his aides and urged for the speeding up of fiscal and regulatory reforms to boost key culture, calling it the core of the strength of a nation. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min has more.
Expanding the power of culture into new economic growth engines. That's what topped the agenda as President Lee Jae-myung presided over a weekly meeting with his senior aides upon returning to work after a long Chuseok holiday.
새로운 21세기 국제사회에서는 문화가 국가의 국격, 경쟁력, 국력의 핵심이라고 생각합니다.
Noting the growing presence of K-culture on the world stage, the president called for the need to create a comprehensive set of measures that can encompass the cultural ecosystem, adding that the notion of culture goes beyond music and art to dramas, food and beauty industries, and even democracy.
문화 콘텐츠 기반 확충에 필요한 재정이나 또 세제, 규제 측면에서 혁신의 속도를 내야 되겠습니다. 그리고 연계산업과의 시너지 효과를 높일 수단을 다양하게 강구해 봐야 되겠습니다.
The focus was also on ways to strengthen the social safety net for artists, as well as measures to support fine art, called upon by President Lee. On top of that, the Lee administration has upped next year's budget for the culture sector by nearly 9% to 9.6 trillion won, worth some $6.8 billion.
The budget for culture and art has been increased by 14%, including K-content funds and global K-culture hubs. The budget for tourism was increased by 9.5%, including a tourism pass for foreign visitors.
Monday's discussions were a reflection of Lee's policy priorities on taking care of people's livelihoods in the face of a tug-of-war trade talks with the U.S., as well as intensifying global uncertainties over the fresh rivalry between the U.S. and China.
대내외 여건이 어렵긴 하지만 바람이 거셀수록 또 연이 높이 나는 원리도 생각해 봐야 되겠습니다. 지금 우리가 처한 위기를 국민의 삶을 개선하는 새로운 기회로 만들 수 있도록 주권자 제1의 공복으로서 국가 역량을 단단하게 모아 나가야 되겠습니다.
Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. U.S. President Donald Trump says he is considering sending Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. Trump's remarks follow a weekend phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who urged stronger U.S. support to launch counterattacks and insisted that the Tomahawks would be used only against Russian military targets. Zelensky will meet Trump in Washington on Friday to discuss air defense and long-range capabilities. However, Moscow warned that supplying Tomahawks would trigger a major escalation and further strain U.S.-Russia relations. The missile's 2,500-kilometer range would put Moscow within reach from Ukrainian territory. Trump's stance toward Vladimir Putin has hardened as ceasefire talks stalled, and he now warns Russia not to, quote, test Washington's patience. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov calls the idea, quote, of extreme concern, saying Russia cannot know whether incoming Tomahawks carry nuclear warheads. In Madagascar, weeks of protests and growing army defections have caused President Rajoelina to flee the country. An opposition figure confirmed that officials acknowledged the president left Sunday on a French military plane after elite troops joined demonstrators. In a Facebook address, Rajoelina said he was in a, quote, safe location and vowed not to, quote, allow Madagascar to be destroyed, yet refused to resign. France's President Emmanuel Macron urged calm and respect for constitutional order, but declined to confirm French involvement. Protests that began over power and water shortages have become a national revolt over corruption and poverty. According to the UN, at least 22 people have died in the protests. With the Senate now taking interim control and the military asserting power, Madagascar faces its worst instability in a decade. In Mexico, at least 64 people are dead, with another 65 missing after a week of torrential rain triggered flash floods and landslides across 5 states. Officials say rivers overflowed and entire neighborhoods vanished as floodwaters tore through Veracruz, Hidalgo, and Puebla. More than 100,000 homes are damaged and 80 communities remain cut off. Troops are airlifting food and water to isolated towns still in darkness. President Claudia Sheinbaum says thousands of troops have been deployed to the affected areas. Finally, to the U.S., where California's Governor Gavin Newsom has signed the nation's first law regulating AI chatbots, rejecting White House calls for a hands-off approach to artificial intelligence. The new law forces chatbot operators to build in critical safety measures for users and allow lawsuits when failures cause harm. Supporters say it closes a deadly gap exposed by recent teen suicides linked to unregulated AI companions. The bill was inspired by the death of a 14-year-old boy who had exchanged suicidal messages with a chatbot modeled on a fantasy series character. Newsom said California, quote, won't stand by while companies continue without limits or accountability.
The gloomy weather trend continues across the country. While the rain has mostly eased here in Seoul, strong intense pockets of rain are expected across southern regions by this afternoon. The parts of the south and Gangwon-do province might see rain into this evening. Then Gyeongsang-do provinces and south of Gangwon-do might see up to 60 millimeters. Jeollanam-do province will see up to 40 millimeters of showers. And as for the top temperatures, southern provinces will notice much cooler daytime highs at 21 degrees in Daegu, 25 in Gwangju, but Jeju still warm at 28 degrees. Apart from coming back from a long break, if you feel unusually tired or sluggish, please note that it's a normal biological response to the weather. We've had consistent rain for a month and a half across Korea. You'll need to be patient this week with more rain in the forecast through Saturday. Then sunshine and much colder temperatures return to the country on Sunday.
Now that is all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
To set the facts straight. Get Korea right.
안녕하세요. 저는 방크에서 활동하는 홍단비 청년연구원입니다. 대한민국이라는 국가가 존재한다는 사실을 전 세계에 알리는 공식적인 징표이자 국민을 하나로 통합하게 하는 힘을 가진 이것. 바로 태극기인데요. 일제강점기 당시 태극기는 우리 민족을 하나로 통합시키는 구심점 같은 역할을 하기도 했죠. 대한민국 국기인 태극기에 대해 잘못 알고 있거나 오해하는 부분들이 가끔 발견되더라고요. 제가 태극기에 담긴 의미와 역사에 대해 제대로 알려드릴게요. 최초의 태극기는 1882년에 처음 만들어졌다고 해요. 이후 다양한 형태의 태극기가 제작됐다가 지금은 국가에서 국기를 체계적으로 관리하는 법을 만들어 시행하고 있어요. 태극기에 담긴 의미를 알아볼까요? 먼저 흰색 바탕은 밝음과 순수, 그리고 평화를 사랑하는 우리의 민족성을 나타내요. 태극기 가운데에는 태극 문양이 들어가는데요. 이 태극 문양은 우주 만물이 음양의 조화로 인해 생물을 얻고 발전한다는 대자연의 진리를 표현한 것이라고 해요. 다음으로 건공감리를 그려볼게요. 4개 모서리에 그린 4괴에는 각기 다른 의미가 있어요. 건괴는 하늘, 곤괴는 땅, 감괴는 물, 이괴는 불을 상징해요. 우리 선조들이 생활 속에서 즐겨 쓰던 태극 문양을 중심으로 만들어진 태극기는 우주와 더불어 끝없이 창조와 번영을 바라는 우리 민족의 이상을 담고 있답니다. 대한민국의 정체성과 자긍심을 드러내고 우리 민족을 하나로 뭉치게 하는 태극기, 우리의 자랑스러운 국가 상징입니다. 한국 바로 알리기. 여러분도 함께 해주세요.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Tuesday, October 14th here in Seoul. I'm Isojin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Kyun.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Also, Wonmi's with us.
Good morning.
Good morning. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So as we step into the second day of the work week, let's start with a buzz phrase that's been trending in Korea lately, young 40. It's a term that's been popping up everywhere recently, from social media to the news, and it's sparking quite a bit of conversation about how people view age and identity today. And it's received even more attention as people live longer and stay healthier. So what used to be considered old is now seen as just another chapter full of possibilities. So Kyun, have you heard of the term young 40 before? What does this mean?
Yes, I have, because it's been trending quite a lot lately and spreading quite fast online. The term first came out around 10 years ago, and it was a newly coined combination of words young and 40, young 40. So it started as a concept of middle-aged people in their 40s who strive to maintain a young mindset like those in their 20s. Unlike the traditional middle-aged adults, they were better known for their sensitivity to trends with a youthful sense of taste as well. And they were also called terms like 꽃중년, 꽃 meaning flower, 중년 middle-aged, so figuratively meaning blooming middle-aged people or youthful middle-aged people with young spirits who could easily get along with much younger people.
I think on social media, I've also seen posts of Instagram posts of they make a list of celebrities who are people in their young 40s. They're still really popular. Have you also heard of this?
Yeah, so I heard of this term as well, young 40. For our viewers, in Korean, we say 영포티 with a Korean accent. And like Kyun explained, it's a word that explains the impression of the people who are in their 40s in 2025, because I feel like things have changed a lot when it comes to their impression. Because in the past, when we hear that someone is in their 40s, I don't want to be too blunt, but we would usually think the words like old or not trendy anymore. In Korean we say 아저씨 and 아줌마. But now when you look at people who are in their 40s, they're very far away from being old or not trendy. They can use their phones or technologies without any difficulties, very active on social media, also cares a lot about their appearance as well. So yeah, this term literally refers to the people who are in their 40s nowadays who pursue a really youthful lifestyle.
I think before, in the past, when you think of people in their 40s, you think people that are a lot older. But now, obviously, they use their phones really well. They're very tech savvy. So as you mentioned, it's not just about being young and heart. It's a whole new lifestyle that blends confidence and a modern mindset. So it looks like this generation is redefining what it means to be middle-aged. So let's take a look at a video to learn more. As life expectancy continues to rise, the way we think about middle age is changing. What used to be considered old at 40 is no longer the case. Many in their 40s today are just as trendy, active, and connected as those in their 20s and 30s. The term itself carries a positive vibe, celebrating this new dynamic stage of life, but it's also sometimes used to poke fun at those who don't act their age. On today's episode of News Generation, we'll take a closer look at the meaning of young 40s in Korean society, explore how people in their 20s and 30s perceive them, and see how this generation is viewed abroad. As we just saw in the video, many people in their 40s are redefining what it means to be middle-aged. They're active, stylish, and often just as trend-savvy as a younger generation. They're embracing new hobbies, keeping up with technology, and expressing themselves through lifestyle choices that used to be seen as exclusive to people in their 20s and 30s. So it's a shift that really challenges old stereotypes about what life in your 40s should look like. And now when people hear the term young 40, a certain image often comes to mind. So what kind of image do they usually associate with it, Wonbin?
Well, I think it would be appropriate for me to explain what the public thinks and the image that the public has. And Gi-hoon will explain this further once I give you guys the actual impression that people have. And heads up, it's a double-edged sword. So for men, they would be wearing a snapback cap for the trendy fashion style. Plus, they must be wearing a sling bag or like an eco bag, sneakers for shoes, and the latest, newest flagship smartphone is also a must for the young 40s. And for women, they would be wearing a regular fit jean or slacks for that youthful, trendy fashion. And they would add a subtle luxury scarf or a luxury bag to kind of silently show how thick their wallet is. So as you can see in the picture, it's actually quite similar to what the MZ generation, what the younger people would actually wear, with just a bit of touch of luxury to show off their buying power.
As we saw on the screens, it's interesting to see what youth means for both genders. For men, it often comes through casual, sporty looks like sneakers, snapbacks, and baseball-inspired outfits. For women, it seems like it's more about elegance and sophistication, often expressed through luxury accessories and polished, fashionable outfits. But the perception of the term young 40s has shifted. While it originally had a positive connotation, celebrating this new dynamic stage of life is increasingly being used in a more teasing or even mocking way, from what I know. So can you tell us more about this, Kim?
Sure. So originally, young 40 had a positive meaning, but recently has come to be used in a mocking tone. It now refers to immature middle-aged people who desperately want to stay forever young. In particular, it is often used sarcastically to describe middle-aged men who pretend to be quite gentle and open-minded, but are actually old-fashioned or patronizing, or 꼰대, as we call it in Korean. And the term sweet young 40 also emerged, satirizing 40-something male bosses who flirt with younger female co-workers under the disguise of being kind or charming. And there were even videos like online that went viral depicting the sad reality of the so-called sweet young 40s, where they pretend to know all the new trends in terms of the abbreviated words that many young people use to also fashion. And they think they're actually quite attractive to much of these younger women. But in fact, it is quite the opposite in reality, as everyone else views them as just old people who try a little too hard to look young. That doesn't really fit what they wear or how they express themselves. So in turn, like, they don't see them as very attractive, which is the sad truth. But I have actually seen a lot of men who actually dress like the photos we just saw, although they were AI generated. But I've seen a lot of men who actually just exactly wear like head to toe.
I've seen some too, yeah.
In that outfit. Some of them actually can pull it off, but I think at the end of the day, it's all about your body shape as well. I mean, if you have like a beer belly, obviously people might think, oh, why is he wearing that kind of, tight shirt that many young people would wear? But I think, at the end of the day, it is what it is. Like, they want to express themselves, they want to look young, let them be. But there is a lot of clash of criticism and how we perceive things, but we'll tap more into it later,
So that really shows how the meaning of the term can evolve from celebrating a youthful mindset to poking fun at certain behaviors. So it looks like the term can also carry a bit of satire, especially for those who try too hard to act younger than they are. And this makes you wonder how the broader public, such as people outside of Korea, also perceive the term. So to get a broader perspective, we reached out to our viewers on the Arirang News YouTube channel and asked, how do you perceive the term young 40? So let's take a look. So according to the survey, 57% of respondents viewed the term positively, while 30% perceived it more negatively. The remaining 13% fell into other or neutral categories. So it looks like more than half of people who think of the term positively as a reference to show how many 40s today are active and style conscious, but the 30% who see it negatively remind us that some still view the term as calling up people in that age group as trying too hard or not quite fitting that age stereotype. So as someone in their 20s, Wonbin, how do you personally view the term and people in their 40s in general, I guess?
Well, I don't, excuse me, I don't have many chances to meet or talk with people who are in their 40s. However, I do hear many stories from my students, and most of the stories that I hear are actually from work because their bosses or supervisors are usually in their late 30s or early 40s, which is the common age when people become or enter their phase of a young 40. The stories that I hear from my students are mostly negative stories, such as boss trying to be all trendy or trying to be sweet and nice to certain demographics only, or trying to fit into the younger group when everyone else clearly feels uncomfortable. But I did hear these stories even before the term young 40 became popular negatively, so I think it's more just about, general age gap or generation gap between people rather than specifically about the young 40s themselves. So yes, people often do complain about it. I hear it often, but I don't hear much direct hate towards the people who are so-called the young 40s.
So yeah, I agree with a lot of things you said. For many young people in the office, it seems like young 40 has become shorthand for that older colleague doesn't quite get us, often used more critically than as a compliment. It's interesting how a term that originally celebrated youthful minds and can shift kind of depending on who's using it and how it's being used. And speaking of perspective, so as someone in their 30s, how do you think the term young 40 is being used today, Kyun? Do people your age see it differently from those in their 20s, do you think?
Thanks for opening my age range. But yes, as someone in their 30s, I guess we are, less vocal about using the term young 40 compared to those in their 20s because we're not that far away from hitting the 40 mark. There's a smaller age gap, of course, but if we just look at the negative side, I mean, we can go on forever. And we can also talk about the 20s these days and how they're very different to the past generation, 20s of the past generations, how they are able to, not be able to connect with the older generation. They don't really want to communicate, and we can just criticize all day, and the list goes on. But to look at things from the bright side, personally, I think young 40s tend to be a bit more understanding across generations, especially their parents' generations, and they're at least trying to connect with the younger generation by looking into what they're interested in terms of like what they drink, what they like to eat, and like just the culture in general, the cultures of 20s. And I think in my experience as well, many of my friends in their 40s are quite stylish, and they are holding in a respectable position in society, and I do respect them for the success they've actually created. And we were talking about this before going on air, how the 40s now, back in when they were in their 20s, they work super hard, and that's why they're in that kind of social status at the moment. Therefore, they can actually experience and enjoy the luxury of trying to dress young because they have that a freedom as well, economic freedom as well. So I think I do respect people in their 40s, but I do understand how people in their 20s think, like Wonbin. But he's putting it in a very positive light. But I've seen many other 20s, people in their 20s, who are kind of very negative towards these young 40s.
Yeah, I think the reason why this becomes a topic of discussion is because they have such big roles in their companies, no matter what respective fields they are in. Like when I talk to my friends, like everyone knows a 40, someone in their 40s that they work with. But it comes from, like you said, they have the confidence of the experience, and they also have an important position in their company because they've had that work experience. I think that's why we're talking about that right now. So to get deeper understanding on this, we're going to hear from someone who's actually in his 40s. He'll give us a first-hand perspective on what it really means to be a young 40 today. That conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Brian, a Korean in his 40s. Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello. Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
So from your perspective as someone in your 40s, what do you think about the term young 40?
Wow, it is very interesting, and I'm the only in my 40s in this group, so I'm glad that I've been invited to this discussion. But as someone who is in my late 40s, not early 40s, so I believe like young 40s. It seems to me that it's an interesting time. Basically, I didn't get to know about this until I was asked to speak about it. So what I'm saying is, it's a buzzword. It's it went viral, in a way, but not many people actually got to know about this until they, watched the video or something like this. So to me, like at first, I thought of it as something good because it's young 40, so young carries a positive meaning, obviously. So that's what I thought. But as I did some research, over time, obviously, people make fun of or scoff at the people in their 40s who dress like young.
Yes. Right, so yeah, Brian, how do today's 40s differ from the previous generations in their 40s?
Okay. I would say, back in the day, in the 40s, put their family first, no matter what. I mean, they sacrificed their lives, for their kids. I mean, obviously, they were when they were young, they were poor and they were hungry, so they had to, work very hard to support their kids, and so they really sacrificed their lives. However, in contrast, these days, people in the 40s, I'm under the impression that they take care of their family as well, but that doesn't mean they take care of themselves too. Their lifestyle, they pursue like a better lifestyle. They seem to have more hobbies. They just that's why that they kind of buy stuff, thanks to buying power. You mentioned earlier, but that doesn't mean that they kind of intentionally buy things to look young or to act like they're in their 20s and 30s. They somehow kind of gradually with more money they earn, they seem to put their personal life before everything else, and not to mention that they do take care of their family as well. So I would say, like in terms of the spending habits or the things they do, obviously people nowadays put more focus on their personal life too, in addition to taking good care of their family.
Well, thank you for giving us the explanation of the differences between the past. And if you could give a piece of advice or share a message with people in their 20s and 30s, or us, what would it be?
I don't know. I don't know whether I'm the good person to give advice or kind of word of advice to people in their 20s and 30s. But going back to the young 40, I would say, young. I believe we will hear the term young 50 or young 60 later on. So the people in their 20s and 30s, obviously, they're young. So my take on it is, the advice I like to give them is have fun, because when they are young, they can do whatever they want to do. They can just enjoy their lives. But I know like this society is full of concerns. In a way, they have they do have legitimate concerns as to whether to get a decent job or not, whether to make ends meet, whether to get a house later on. So there are many things that they have like in their head. So I would say the question they have to ask themselves is whether or not they are having fun with their life, and just don't be afraid of getting old or getting older, because it's fun. It's fun to grow old, and it's natural. It's because it's a natural process. So I want people in their 20s and 30s to have something they want to enjoy, and then I would say I want to see them I want them to have something that they feel good about, or kind of that keeps them alive. So at the end of the day, so that's what they want to do in the 30s or 40s as they get older. So I don't think I'm kind of generalizing the generation 40 myself, and then I'm not in a good position to give advice. But as someone who lived longer, I would say, enjoy your life.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your insight and giving us advice about how important it is to have fun. So thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Thank you for having me once again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So we just heard from someone who's actually in his 40s, but what it's considered to be a young 40, how today's 40s differ from previous generations, what message you might have for people in their 20s and 30s. The term has clearly gained a lot of traction here in Korea, but it raises an interesting question. Are there similar concepts or memes about 40-somethings in other countries? So how do people abroad view this stage of life, and do they have their own versions of the young 41?
Yeah, so actually in Japan, they have a term called arapo, which is a Japanese way of saying around 40. And this term refers to women in their 40s who are not married, but financially independent enough to enjoy life and look nice as well. So the difference is that it's only targeted for unmarried single women, but the idea is pretty similar with the young 40, the word that we have in Korea.
So I think there is a tendency for unmarried older people to be targeted, especially in many Asian cultures where there's often social pressure to follow traditional life paths. Yes. But in Korea, things have improved a lot in recent years. TV shows and media now celebrate people who live alone, portraying them as independent, confident, fully capable of enjoying life on their own terms. So Kyun, can you tell us how people in their 40s are perceived in Western countries? Are there any terms similar to young 40? Yeah, so in Western countries, the term frumpy is used to refer to people in their 40s who are kind of old-fashioned and a little overweight, whereas in contrast, fabulous 40s refers to those who are financially secure, active, stylish, and maintain a youthful lifestyle. And there are also expressions like 40 is the new 20 and life begins at 40. So as we've seen today, the term young 40 sparks a mix of admiration, humor, and sometimes criticism. While there's been some controversy over how it's used, occasionally mocking those in their 40s, it also highlights an important shift in how society views this stage of life. People in their 40s today are redefining what it means to be middle-aged. They're active, independent, and embracing life on their own terms. So rather than being seen as old, 40s should be celebrated for the new possibilities they represent. A reminder that age is just a number, and that this decade of life, like any other, can be just as vibrant, dynamic, and inspiring as your 20s. And this brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation, but we'll be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and conversations. A big thanks to Kyun.
Always a pleasure.
And also Wonbin.
Thank you for having me.
For coming in. And to our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you have the best day. We are News Generation.
갈까요?
갈까요?
갈까요? 갈까요? 어디 가요? 한글 만나러!
A country where traditional and modern cultures coexist.
Where you can explore spectacular landscapes and nature.
Savor the delights of traveling at every turn.
Where? Korea, of course.
There are some must-visit places in Korea. Ones that appear in every tour guidebook: Hangang River, Gyeongbokgung Palace from the Joseon Dynasty, and
Yes, these are essentials, but I want to go somewhere a little different. I don't have to follow the guidebook. For example, filming locations for K-pop music videos or K-dramas and movies.
traveling is all about taking it slow. A long walk at your own pace, or even zoning out somewhere quiet. Doesn't it sound relaxing?
You travel for the experience, trying something new in a foreign place, de-stressing and making lifetime memories, taking tons of pictures along the way.
70% of the Korean territory is mountainous. Naturally, hiking is a very popular pastime in Korea. Not your kind of activity? Trust me, the view will make the effort worth it. Just catch your breath by the cold stream in the valley.
Korea is surrounded by the sea on three sides. From the beach, you can enjoy